Hello there, math fans. Going to continue my discussion of March Madness. This one's going to be the more practical tips and data. I will not claim to be an expert. I'm not going to claim that I'm going to make you win your bracket pool, but I'd like to collect some of the typical advice people give, show you a collection of data I found, give you a research idea, which I hope some student will want to take on as a project. And then in the next video, I'll actually talk about some of the questions I asked when I thought about this problem years ago. All right. So, first, about some practical tips. I've collected a bunch of data from NCAA.com, their website, and articles written. I hope I didn't miss an author, but there was an article by Daniel Wilco, an article by Wayne Statz, an article by Andy Wittry, and these are all just tables they include in those articles on ncaa.com. Lots of great analysis there. Again, I'm taking things hopefully a little different way. But I want to talk about these three things. The truth is, by and large, picking the seeds is going to be the best way to go. But let's just say why I say that and some of the data I found and collected. So in the first round, the seeds typically win. There's a little bit of data here that the 8 and 9 might be a one you'd pick a different way. But this is just the first round. If you look at kind of the whole tournament, seeds typically make it pretty far. So if you pick, there's this thing people don't understand that, let's say you start picking lots of upsets. If you get the upset right, that's great. If you get it wrong, not only did you get it wrong, but now you've removed a higher seed. And there might have been an upset somewhere else. So if you're expecting one upset and you get it wrong, then you've made a mistake in two places. The upset you picked and the upset you didn't pick. So it'd be better to just pick all the seeds. It's a sad state of things. Okay, so there's the winning percentages in the first round, and I mentioned how you can use those throughout to sort of get a better, more accurate, chances of picking a perfect draw. All right, I'm going to remove, so I have several things hiding here. Ready? Let's see if this works. This is my low-tech version. Everything I do is going to be low-tech. So if you're looking for somebody to make nice graphics, you got to go elsewhere. So here's data looking back of overall records of every seed. What's the winning percentage of the first seed? What's the winning percentage of the 15th seed? I think this anomaly at the bottom about the 16th seed has to do with the fact that we have the first four. I think that has changed the data a little bit. But you can see higher seeds win more. So again, that same philosophy of if you're picking lots of upsets, let's say you don't get the upset right, and there's an upset somewhere else, again, you're doubly wrong. Better to just pick the seeds. That's the stats suggest that. All right. So let me go a little further on some other things I've found. So let's get rid of this one. So another bit of data here. Let me keep this here. And I have several things I'm going to show you, as you can see, that I've collected. This is from the Bracket Challenge. This is, again, from one of those articles. And they say, what happens if you just pick the seeds? And they went back several years. This is the ESPN Bracket Challenge, I believe. So if you just pick the seeds, this is on the left. This is what your bracket score would be, according to their scoring system, where they give more points for doing well at the end, less points at the beginning. And these are all the points you'd get if you had picked completely just seeds. And then here is the average score of people that entered. And so you can see in almost all cases, it was dramatically better to pick the seeds over the average score. That doesn't mean the seed pick wins, but if you're trying to win your pool or be good in your pool, you got to pick lots of seeds. But it's really dramatic here how much better some of these were over the cases of the average score. So it's just hard to beat that. I mean, there's a reason there's the seeding. The statistics suggest that that's the way it's going to go. It's super boring, though. If you pick all seeds, in most systems, that's going to be the best. Now, some systems have try to encourage by having more points for upsets and things. That might be more fun. Again, there's this idea of what wins your pool and what's actually fun. All right, so let's get rid of that and go a little further. So, just other things. I know we've got some things showing in the background again. If you're looking for high quality production, that's somewhere else. um, Here's a breakdown of how many number one seeds have made the Final Four. Okay. So there was one time when it was all four number one seeds. So it's a very somewhat unlikely that that would happen. But again, if you're chasing the one, let's say you pick 3 1 seeds and then you choose one to not be a 1 seed and you get it wrong, then you're doubly wrong. You're wrong with the one you picked and you're wrong with the one that is not there. So again, chasing this might be kind of tough. Now, there are overall seeds. So you could, I'm just right now playing the game of 1s and 2s and 3s that's typically played. So it'd be interesting to sort of, what about if you actually look at the seeds, 1 to 68 and work based off of that? I'm sure that gives you a little more information. Okay. So the majority of the time, though, you are going to have 1 or 2 1 seeds in the final. So you can see there's fairly dramatic in terms of numbers. Let me grab something here. These 2 numbers I'm talking about. So majority of the time, there's 1 or 2, and sometimes 3. So probably the expected number would be around 2, maybe a little more than 2, that are going to be in there. Okay, that leads to a research idea. Pretty much when you look online where people have done analysis of situations where someone picks all the seeds, which you can see I have had some of these in the table. Someone picks all the seeds. How does it go? How does it compare? Now, in a lot of these tournament challenges, you can fill out many brackets, sometimes 20, sometimes more. Now, I've said before that I think that's kind of rotten to fill out lots of brackets. But if you're going to let me fill out lots of brackets, it naturally leads to some questions. So the analysis to me that would make sense is, what if you just go here to, the Elite Eight, and let's assume you're down to just 1s and 2 seeds. Let's assume we've picked all seeds to that place, which is probably a good strategy. So here's my strategy. Pick all seeds to this spot. I'm sure other people have done this before. Super boring, I know. And then let's think about all combinations. What if a 1 here wins here, and a 2 wins here, and a 1 wins here, and a 1 wins here? That's one combination. And then we could that's 1, 2, 3, 4 games. So if you watched my previous video on counting that, the number of possibilities is 2 to the 4th. All right. And then what do you have? So we have all those possibilities. Then you can pick who wins those, the 2 semifinal games. So that's going to be, there's 2 choices for this one. There's 2 choices for this one. This is 2 squared. And then you have the final game. So one of these 1s and one of the 2s, there's 2. That's still pretty darn large. So what is that? That's 2 to the 6th, 2 to the 7th. Let's calculate real quick. 2 to the 7th. So we still would need 128 draws. So if you wanted to submit, you'd have to find many websites and you'd say, I'm going to do everything seeds to the Elite Eight, and then I'm going to have systematically fill out 128 draws, and those 128 draws will have every possible combination of ending from this point on. So my question is, if you're allowed 128 draws and you do that, how does that compare to the historical record? What is your best draw of those? I have a feeling that among those 128, you're going to have some that have very high scores every year. So my theory is, if you did this and could fill out 128 draws, one of your draws is going to do very well, at least. But I don't know if that's quite right, because there's going to be years when a 3 seed got in or something. But this also gives you a feel for the size of the problem, because you see I'm just working from the Elite Eight. All right. So that's the again two choices here, two choices here, two choices there, two choices there, two choices here, here, and the final. It's surprising how small that is. You already have 128 draws. So when I was trying to tame it down to like 20 draws, you have to basically just look at the final four. So if you just look at the final four, and again, what I'd like to do is to take those draws, go back to each year, and see how many points you would have gotten and where it would have fit in the system. I think that would be a fun little research project that would extend kind of what is done. People have just looked at the seeds everywhere, but this gives a little more flexibility and kind of ties in what my real question is, which is the next video. Okay, so if you just did the final four, you have an unfortunate problem. And what you could do if you wanted to cut this down is you could take the overall one seed and say, I'm going to put them in there. But each time you do that, you're cutting, how much you spread. So you'd have to figure out ways to cut. You could say like, I am not going to have the lowest 2 seed go in. And I am going to have the highest 1 seed go in, wherever that would be. And that would allow you to cut it down to 64 and then down to 32, which I think was the system I was kind of, when I first thought of this, I was like, okay, I can get it down to about 32. Can I guarantee one of those is good? Okay. But by doing that, you reduce the chances that one is good. So it's a balancing act. Even if you just got down to the final four and you said, I'm going to assume there's all 1 seeds. Now, that's not going to be a good likelihood. You still have a few possibilities because you could have 2 that could win here, 2 that could win here, and you already have 8. There's 8 draws. So you do all 8 of those draws with all the seeds to that point. You could see how that works. All right. You then could say, well, what if I just do the ones that are 2s and 1s, since those are somewhat more likely? You'd have to pick where you want the 2s and 1s to be. You say, I'm just going to ignore these other ones. That cuts me down a little bit, but you would have to say, what if there's 2 2s or 3 2s? So if there's 3 2s, you could count how many that would be. And I could do that arithmetic. I didn't plan to say that, but the question is, how many draws do we want to get it down to? So you could say, like, I think the bracket challenge back when I did it, there were 20 draws. If you take a 20 draw method, whatever it is, compare it with the historical data, that might be sort of interesting. I think what you'll find is you still can't do good, which still would be kind of interesting. All right. So there's my research ideas. Run some of these scenarios against the historical record, but it will require you can score the thing and then compare with what people have done and how it fit with that year. And maybe someone's done something like that. All right. So let's finish this up with the following. And I also have this in here, how seeds have done in the championship game. So this is just an interesting bit of data of how seeds have done in the championship game. No seed higher than 8 has ever been in the championship game. Now, some of this data might be old by a couple years. So you can see that 1 seeds, if they make it to the final, have a little bit higher likelihood. So you could use some of this data to try to cut down a few of your cases. But this is just more evidence that you should pick seeds. All right, let's get rid of that one. And then I have one more thing here before I talk about practical things. So number 2 seed has made the final four 32 times. Number of final four appearances by seeds. So you can see 1, 2, 3, and 4. My original thought was, what if you did the final four? This is a different thought, but it's already too big. So if you'd like to do every possible configuration where there's 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s here, that's tough. You could pick everything to seeds and then pick the final. Again, the question is, if you're only allowed a finite number, but more than one, what do you do? That was really what stemmed my question of, if you're going to give me 50 draws, 100 draws, 3,000 draws, how can I do it? What if I really wanted to cheat and I made like 5 accounts and I got 100 draws? Can I do well? And I think the answer is you can't, but I wanted to explore this a little bit because I'm pretty sure we could cover most of the cases with a few hundred draws if we're just talking about the final 4 or the elite 8. And then you pick seeds the rest of the time. So there's a research project for somebody is explore these, see if any of them do okay. And if I'm not a gambler. The way I gamble is by not gambling, and that way I never lose any money. Maybe someone will think this is something. All right. Okay. Lastly, I just thought I would collect tips. I don't use AI for anything, but I just did. This is one of the first times I've ever used it. So here's what AI suggests. My students use it all the time, which is why they do terrible on exams, because they don't have AI. The AI does not help learn, it appears. My sample data suggests. Okay, this is the suggestion. Don't pick a 16 seed. By doing that, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Number 1 seeds tend to last. We've just seen that data. Don't pick very many upsets. Again, that's the same thing I'm saying. If you pick an upset and you're wrong, then you're probably doubly wrong. Be selective about upsets. Don't go crazy with upsets. These are the things they pull from online. Don't pick too many Cinderellas. That sounds like the same thing. Upset is the way to go. What? It probably depends on the type of pool you're in. Fill out multiple brackets. Again, that's just so you can feel like you're still in the game, but kind of feels rotten. Have fun is probably the right thing to say. Interestingly, pool size matter. I thought about that. If you have a smaller pool, I would think that you would want to be even more likely to pick the seeds. If you have a large pool, there's probably other people that are going to pick seeds, so maybe there's some advantage to doing other things. It talks about how you're sort of looking for this sweet spot of something that's not that popular but has a decent odds and might be able to go a little ways. That's what everyone's searching for, right? I saw it. Sure you did. And then a simple upset strategy, I think what they mean here is something where you could pick an upset in the first round that probably won't go past that. For example, if you have some situation, you have this you can see ahead. I'm sure this is a strategy that people use. You can see that there's like a 1 seed here, and you're certain the 1 seed's going to make it there. And there's not a big risk to pick an upset here, especially if you're kind of feeling that upset, because you're expecting they're going to lose in the next round anyway. So if you get it wrong, it's not that big of a deal. All right, so that's the first collection of strategies I found. I'm sure there's plenty more, but I wanted to grab a couple more. So then I ran it again and got a different AI and saw what it said. What does it say? Key strategies: balance safe picks with calculated risk. That sounds like a financial advisor. Basically, don't jump too much. This is interesting. Analyze guard matchup. So they're suggesting maybe there's some evidence if you have the matchup. That's what everyone thinks they can do, right? Consider team momentum. I'm sure people consider that. Like, this team's been winning towards the end of the season. I don't know how much statistics. I'm sure there's a little bit that's suggestive there. Be selective about upsets. Check betting lines. That's kind of saying, I just am going to trust what the casinos are saying. That's an idea. Adjust your pool size. In smaller pools, have fewer upset picks. Okay, I think I already said that. Look beyond just their seeding. Okay, all those same things we were just talking about. So as far as I can tell, there is no magic bullet, right? You're going to get lucky or not. But the evidence seems really clear that you want to pick lots of seeds. And my research project is, what if you're allowed to pick, let's say, 100 draws? We could pick a number. I think even if the number is large, even if we could pick 10,000 draws, we still are going to have trouble guaranteeing that any of them are going to be good. But I am curious, the mathematical question I'd like to ask is, how big does this number need to be? in order to have some confidence. I think the overall, like the mathematical piece, is going to be hard to prove, but I think you could run lots of experiments. You could say, like, here's a system where we pick mostly good seeds. How big do we need that to grow before, when we plug that into the previous years, we get one that's guaranteed to be above 90% accurate or something, or guaranteed to have a score that's on par with some of the best? That's the question I want to ask, because it's an interesting question about measuring distances between things. And that's the next video I'm going to make, is going to be a little more mathematical, about trying to define the distance between draws. And I feel like that is less of a March Madness thing and more of a picture of what we sometimes do in math, which is build a structure to study something. If we can find enough structure in it, then we can bring in all sorts of tools. So I think the exciting piece is this last. I'm going to define a structure on the collection of all possible draws. And I have a feeling that might excite some math people. And then we'll define what the distance between draws are. And I think that could be an avenue for exploring things like this in more detail. And that might lead to a discussion of tournaments and how tournaments work. So that is what excites me more than the March Madness. But I hope something here helped. Give me a like or subscribe if it did.